Podcasting has made a lot of progress in 20 years for both listeners and creators, but the overall experience isn't all that different. However, some already here tech might drastically change things. Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Today, I'm going to talk about the singularity, or at least a singularity for podcasting. Or better stated, some possible catalysts which might bring about the singularity for podcasting. Now, a quick primer for those of you who aren't quite familiar with this term, or maybe the astrophysicists listening right now who think I'm about to wade into the end of the universe debate. I am not. The singularity I'm speaking of is when an event or a series of events happens that makes the past of something, in podcasting in this case, unfathomable when looking back. Now, the typical view of the singularity is done in reverse of that, from the point of view of someone from the past trying to comprehend post-singularity life. It's kind of like explaining orbital mechanics to an 8th century shipbuilder. It just wouldn't work. And also, time travel is not likely to happen, so I like to do a slight twist where I look at it from the opposite direction. So with that out of the way, let's talk about 4.5 maybe, possible catalysts which could bring about the singularity event for podcasting. An event that is so profound and a change so drastic and making everything different that it really will be difficult to imagine what podcasting was like before this future event actually happened. So 2 quick things before I run down that list. The first is that I firmly believe that podcasting singularity event will be listener-focused, not creator-focused. You and I will have to continually adjust to new creation and distribution and other tools that help us make better podcast content that we can publish somewhere. But none of that is going to lead to podcasting's singularity. That's all behind the curtain stuff that's terribly interesting to us and very well may radically change how we make and publish and distribute our content. But the end users, the people that we make these things for, they don't care about any of that. It'll be the listener experience that marks podcasting's singularity moment when it comes. The second caveat here is that this is not a prediction. This is instead a look at some possible technologies that might have a shot at creating this singularity moment for podcasting. But as you're going to hear, each one of them have serious obstacles to overcome before they have a shot at doing that. And that's coming from a dude who is seriously optimistic about the future of podcasting. So, let's jump into those 5 possible catalysts. Smart speakers. Yeah, since that first black tube with the blue ring on top came out from Amazon, the smart speaker has had its die-hard supporters who are convinced that this was going to be the interface of the future, and not just for podcasts. To a certain degree, they're right. I mean, today, smart speakers are owned by 25% of all American households. Isn't that crazy? American adults over 18, 25% own a smart speaker. And by the way, it's a speaker. It just does audio. So it makes sense that a speaker, a device that is only job is to transmit audio to our ears, would be the singularity bringer. But so far, that hasn't happened. And a big part of the for your ears nature of listening to podcast is part of it. It doesn't line up perfectly with the sounds coming from a speaker 3 feet away nature of a smart speaker. A bigger challenge, I think, for smart speakers, though, is that the interface is still really clunky, which brings me to the second candidate for the possible singularity of podcasting bringer, voice assistants. When feature phones evolved, if you will, into smartphones, the experience of engaging with your device became incredibly tactile. Prior to that, you pressed 7 or maybe 10 keys on a phone and then held the thing up to your ear. No need to look or fidget with it during your call. But phones today aren't phones anymore. They're attention-grabbing or demanding, or sucking, pick your adjective there, communication and control interfaces for the world. But in order for voice assistants, programs that run on mobile devices and smart speakers, to really power a podcast listening experience without visual and tactile input from the listener, they're going to have to get a whole lot better. The good news is AI, machine learning, neural nets, natural language processing, the ingredients to all of these things are there to let us create some Jarvis-like interface that's always with you. I guess to play the next podcast in your queue and maybe do some more things beyond that. The third thing is wearables. Now, I'm old enough to remember walking around with a pair of Google Glass about a decade ago. But now there is talk, and actually a demo right now at CES, where there are 1080p displays in a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses. But here's the challenge with that. Podcasts today aren't for your eyes, they're for your ears. Well, the good news is today's wireless earbuds really are mini computers. They've got their own chipsets. They talk back to one another. If we can couple the advances in voice assistants with some other sort of sci-fi looking hand gesture interface that communicates with those wireless earbuds of the future, then maybe Jarvis really can be in, or at least on, your head. The fourth is the metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg is pouring in a fortune into building Second Life 2.0, as I call it. But the metaverse is actually possibly a contender for a service that might bring about the singularity for podcasts. Now, however, I doubt that listening to a podcast is high on the priority list for anyone living in a future metaverse, at least not in its audio-only or audio-first version today. But the metaverse could be a place to build better podcast communities and maybe even events for listeners to attend. Today, time and location dependencies are the big barrier for podcast events. But the metaverse gives promise of removing at least one of those things, until Mark invents a time machine and fix that too. Now we come with Web 3, and it's the time we talk about the blockchain, and it's worth keeping an eye on. Look, not for NFTs, crypto speculation, or other financial transactions, but as a different distribution method and a platform that might better empower curators. Now look, it's still very, very early, and all of the buzz seems more about rent-seeking than user-enabling. At least that's my take. But the decentralized nature of podcasting and the decentralized nature of the blockchain should have some obvious synergies. Do not ask me how it looks. I do not know. The current Web3 initiatives are very early, and I feel like I have a lot of catch-up to do before I can have a firm grasp on where this might take podcasting. Minus many heavy and intrinsic challenges, I think there might be something there. Maybe. So there you have it. 5 current technologies that may bring about the future, well, the singularity event of podcasting in the future. For singularity event of podcast listening, to be very specific. I again remind you, I am not predicting any of these will be the key catalyst. Heck, I'm not predicting any of these will be anywhere near a catalyst for that. But they are interesting technologies, and some developments that I think that you and I likely should keep our eyes on as we continue doing our work to make podcasting better. That's it. I shall be back tomorrow with yet another podcast Pontifications. Cheers.